So we are back with shitty audio, getting tongue-tied about the next leg of my future. So in the last episode, I was talking about how I'm trying to reignite my hunger for life, for expansion, for things that I've never really let myself be exposed to desiring. And so I'm walking with Roxy through Old Port this morning, and I decided to walk up towards this building that last summer I was looking at when they were still building it out. I was like, man, like that view is going to be such a stellar building. And a couple of weeks ago, I got an Instagram ad saying that that particular building was doing a rent to own option. And if you're unfamiliar with rental owns, basically it's saying you're going to pay rent anyways, so might as well allow that rent to contribute to a down payment that you may not have. Now, I have money in an account, but I would prefer not to use that on a down payment because that's my nest egg, that's my baby. However, something started to spark in me where I'm like, man, if I'm going to pay, anywhere from $2,000 to $3,000 a month in rent anyways, even if I'm not going to rent to own, I'm just going to rent. There's a part of me that's like, that's a sunk cost. Like that's money that I've already acclimated my nervous system into spending. Therefore, it's not an extra expense. So I'm walking through a tunnel and there's cars. It's really loud, but the money, essentially the way that I'm orienting to it is that the money has already been spent in my nervous system. My nervous system is already chill with spending that money. So there's like a perk or a benefit that you get, credit associated with it. Now, mind you, you're not getting the full rental as a contribution to your down payment. That's not how it works. However, that little extra bonus is something that's starting to aliven in me. Like, oh, I could really think about things a little bit differently for myself. Rather than chalking up my rent as a sunk cost never to benefit me, I could be paying rent that is already a sunk cost, but also has benefits. And so this morning when I was walking with Roxy and we were walking through Old Port on our way to this building, what I really noticed was just how loud the birds were and how beautiful it was here to hear them chirp and chip and kind of just be alive in the morning. And then at another point, I just let the day kind of unfold. And then I stumbled upon that building. Now I wasn't intending to see the building, although I did have the desire to walk towards it. That wasn't like the sole purpose of today's walk. And then as we walk around, I'm like, wow, like this building is actually really beautiful. And then there was apartments on the main floor that had the curtains open. And I was like, oh, these are stunning apartments. And then I turned my head and I was like, oh, too bad the view is shit on this side of the building. Because there's it's overlooking some of the industrial areas of Old Port. And so, I'm walking with Roxy and we're just kind of exploring. And the reason why I wanted to share this with you is because, oh, Roxy, leave it alone. It's just a kitty. Is when we get super narrow viewed on goals, it can be a way that we force drive ourselves into a singular path. And that singular path then must work or we've risked too much. It has to prevail or we're fucked. Versus giving ourselves the time for the desire to cook and letting the desire to really unfold and unfurl so we can present ourselves infinite possibilities of having that desire. So for example, I don't really let myself have the desire for home ownership because I have property back in DC that needs a lot of tending to. Home ownership has been something that the experience of it has seemed stressful. Truly, no one I know that owns a home truly lives the life I want. They're not living a life experience that feels desirable for me. So I have this internal orientation that owning a home is nothing more than a status measure, but no one truly enjoys buying a home. They don't enjoy maintaining the home. They don't enjoy paying the mortgage. There's something about what I've witnessed and what I've exposed myself to is just people claiming that buying a home is really exciting and then complaining about it for the next 30 fucking years. And so I haven't really let myself turn towards the desire to own something for myself simply because the experience I've been exposed to is not what I want for myself. Now it's probably a little windy, so you're not able to hear me properly, but I trust you're tuning in. You're taking the good with the bad. And so now that I'm at least allowing myself to turn towards the desire, there is a part of me that I have to be very mindful of that I don't goalify and hyperfixate on said goal, because what that does is it narrows my vision. It narrows my strategy so that I can't think holistically and find the best strategy that can pivot the fastest. Let's say you're a teenager, You hate the life you grew up in. Your family was broke. Parents were broke. You were broke. Nobody had money or wealth. All of a sudden you feel this desire that you want to have more in your life. You want to have some financial means and success. And so what do? Well, you're only exposed to limited abilities of acquiring that. In my time, the only way to acquire wealth was perceived to be you had to go to university. And not only did you have to go to university, you had to graduate in 4 years, get an entry-level job, boogie through that entry-level job, overprove, overproduce, and then you'll get a raise. And then in that raise, then you start getting more restrict with your budget. And then eventually you've got these beautiful investments in this career that's kicking off, and hopefully eventually get another promotion and another raise. And then by the time you're done, you're 65, you'll eventually own your home at that point. And that's what success looks like. I even remember having conversations with my family where they were inviting me to look at government jobs because a government job came with a pension, right? So there was this very narrow strategy to acquire the desire. Now, unfortunately, life ain't one for plans. She certainly does not give a fuck about your strategy, nor how rigid and disciplined you are to maintaining that strategy. What she does care about is your devotion to the energy that is behind the desire of which that strategy was meant to acquire. Okay, so let me say that again. Life only cares about your devotion to the desire, not your discipline in how you acquire it. When I started to peel back from the strategy, the discipline of the strategy, because I was pursuing my degree for 10 years, and it was like I was pushing my head up against a wall, nothing was working. But at the same time, I had this discipline to the strategy. I needed to have the strategy work because if it didn't, there was an internal belief that I couldn't have access to the wealth I desired and that I would be. So 10 years down the road, I've got this career. I'm overgiving, overworking, overproducing. I'm making money. I'm getting really scarce and tight with money, to follow that strategy. And then eventually I hit a wall. Eventually I got burned out again. And what I realized was that my view, my vision, my field of sight was so limited and so narrow that I wasn't actually in a mature, present, nor reverent version of myself. So this version of me that was choosing this narrow view, narrow focus strategy was this one version of me that was so determined to make it through my upbringing of where everything was financially tight. Here's the irony of that. If there's a part of you that is determined to survive, that very version of you will also create circumstances of which you need to survive because it needs to prove that you're capable of surviving it. My invitation is that you've survived it once, and that was plenty. That was enough. We don't need to keep proving things. We don't need to keep validating that you're capable of going through shit times. And so when I realized that, I was like, man, here's this younger version of me who thinks that university is the only way to acquire wealth. And at the same time, I am dying inside. I am not able to maintain this strategy. I feel like I have to sacrifice myself. I feel like I'm burning out. I feel exhausted. I feel overwhelmed. And now I'm basically drilling myself into a hole because I know it's not the way that I want to live, but I can't see anything else. Well, at some point you have to realize that if you can't see any other way of that desire coming true, then you're probably not seated in the seat of possibility, which means that you are in an irreverent adolescent version of yourself who has limited and narrow vision. So what do? Well, you have to allow yourself to let go of the attachment to the strategy. You have to let yourself say, well, wait a minute. What if there is another way? What if this could be easier? What if this could be more fun? What if this could be more pleasurable? And lean back a little bit and then open yourself up to possibilities. Now let's take you back to this desire to own a home, a desire I haven't let myself feel because the association to owning a home has been this self-sacrificial, martyristic pain that I've only been ever exposed to. When I turn towards the desire, what if the strategy that I've been exposed to is only one of infinite ways to have a desire fulfilled? And we already know that, right? One of the potential possibilities of owning a home is inheritance. Well, my parents certainly are not going to be buying a condo anytime soon, so that's out the door. We also know that another way of acquiring a home is to have all the cash. Well, to be 100% honest, if I have $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 sitting in cash, I'm certainly not going to spend all of that on a condo either. And so that's, okay, option 2, not something I want to do. Okay, well, I could also sit here and work until I have a down deposit. And then once I have a down deposit, make sure my credit's high. And you know what? That sounds really exhausting. What's another way? I'm open to receiving more possibilities for this desire to be fulfilled. And I'm open to that desire to be fulfilled without sacrifice, without martyrdom, without pain, without struggle, but simply opportunity. And once you begin to orient yourself to being open to other strategies that are more in line with your value system, you're going to start to be present to more opportunities. You're going to start to see things that you didn't see before because you weren't previously open to them. And so this rent-to-own option, it wasn't that I wasn't ever present to the strategy. My dad had rent-to-own agreements for different rental properties growing up. I just was never aware that you could do that with condos, with these beautiful luxury homes. I was never aware that that was a thing that could exist, but I was open to finding out more possibilities because I knew that my narrow frame of reference was only going to reinforce the belief patterns, the value systems of my inner teen who values freedom and autonomy, but doesn't know how to acquire it. But she does also know how to sacrifice herself, but does not have the value of self-reverence yet. Self-reverence is like an adult practice, to really respect and revere the truth of who you are and the truth of the life unfolding in front of you. That's not something that we can reasonably expect a teenager to be qualified to practice, right? Teenagers are not here for that. Teenagers are here for exploration and curiosity and discovery and creativity and fun and risk and learning. And so when we force an adolescent version of ourselves to practice something that's actually outside of their developmental arena, it's unfair, and it can ultimately create these like hyper-conformist teenagers who end up feeling totally lost in their adult years because they were an adult far too young. They're parentified, right? Coming back to this, we have these inner teens that are recreating their youth that may or may not have been aligned to their developmental capability. And then in turn, we recreate the experience of not being able to get what we want or not being able to survive the circumstances that we're in because they're hard or difficult or whatever. Again, narrow frame of reference, narrow view, narrow vision, narrow strategy. Because it would be radically unfair to ask a teenager version of yourself to create a reverent, a self-respecting strategy. So when you come into the seat of your adult self, the matured, the self-respecting version of you, you don't just take the only strategy you know. You're going to ask yourself, what other strategies will have me honor my values without sacrificing myself? Well, and you don't even have to add that because really, if the strategy honors your values, no one values self-sacrifice. That's a weird thing to value if you do. So at this point, I'm sitting here walking through the city. I'm exposing myself to the desire. I'm turning towards the desire, and I'm open to the acquisition of that desire to be completed through something other than what I have been exposed to in my life. I'm open to the fulfillment of that desire happening in a way I have never done, nor been exposed to others having done it before. This means I'm literally open to having a brand new experience of life. What would it be like to buy a home and not have the orientation of suffering attached to that house? Because frankly, that's the reason why I haven't wanted the desire. I have literally never met somebody who was like, oh my God, I love paying my mortgage. I've literally never met someone who was like, oh my God, I'm just so happy to call the plumber because I'm the owner of this home and I need to maintain it. Like, I haven't met people who have that orientation. And so in my mind, home ownership was this like lethargic, exhausting thing that people just did to feel successful in their life, even though they're not happy. So again, if that is the narrow vision, if that is the thing that my inner teen sees, maybe, just maybe, I don't let her be the one driving the strategy behind home ownership. Again, it sounds ridiculous, right? Like, you're like, well, no shit. You don't want a teenager buying a house. That's a lot of responsibility. Absolutely. But psychologically, if you are orienting from a juvenile place, it's no different than having a teenager be responsible for something that is developmentally beyond their capacity. So how do I say this? Well, this is really the work of the piggy bank on a more financial component, but allowing myself to just be open to different possibilities and different curiosities of how this desire can be fulfilled from an adult place, from a reverent place, is exciting. Like, as I was looking at this apartment, I could tell that there's more energy growing inside of me. I was getting more excited, even though I may never buy this apartment, right? Like, we don't know that much. And so I'll leave you there. If you're interested in joining the piggy bank, it is a private audio program that is purely designed to move your inner teen away from your financial decisions so that your adult self can step into confidence in facing any financial reality. It's a pretty great program, if I don't say so myself. There's 4 different modules, each catered to the 4 main areas of money: expenses, income, savings, and debt. It also has you navigate it through the lens of still taking care of this part of you that would rather prove how capable you are. And we know that you're capable, and we know that you have the capacity to survive a shit ton of things. And at the same time, you did it once. It's time to leave it there. You don't need to relive the same experience over and over again. You don't need to survive something you've already done once. That was plenty. And so let's make sure that the choices that we're making in terms of our finances are coming from the life that we truly desire to be having, rather than recreating the experience that we know how to survive and we understand how to survive because our frame of reference is so narrow. And so you can head over to the link in the show notes to sign up. And I would love to know in my DMs at Stefania Maria with 2 A's at the end of what you got from this shitty audio and shitty rant as I walk Roxy and I'm all pooped and out of breath.